G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Christie David, and I run a mortgage broking business called Atelier Wealth, where we help specialise in taking Australian investors from their start to their ambitions to scale up their property portfolio. The nature behind building out these podcasts was the opportunity to chat to people that have been there, done that, and I use the word best in breed. So a lot of the people that we bring on are experts in their field, and I feel like we are absolutely privileged and honoured to have them join us because their intentions are pure. They want to share their knowledge, they want to help other investors grow, and off the back of that, it's what I call a win-win. They get to pass and pay it forward with their knowledge and journey, but our investor clients also get to pick their brains and maybe not have access to some of these great professionals. And today's guest is a name that if you know anything about investing in property, it's a name that comes synonymous with property investment. Welcome to the show, Bushy Martin from KnowHow Property. How you doing?
Yeah, awesome, Aaron. Very humbled and privileged and excited to join you and talk all things property today, mate.
The feelings are mutual, and I don't say that lightly. You're a person in both the broking sphere but also the property sphere, where people hold you in a really high esteem. I certainly don't say that to blow any smoke because you don't buy into that, but more so, a lot of the guests that we've had on is what I call sustained success. So you've had a career that's gone and stood the test of time. You've had clients that are sung your praises. Yep, you might have picked up a few accolades or awards on the journey, but that was never the intention. It was, how do I help more Australians and how do I help show up to be the best that I possibly can be as well?
Yeah, we're peas in the pod, I think, in that respect, Aaron. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun today.
Absolutely, mate. Let's get into it. Now, I've read a lot about you, Bushy, and I've been fortunate to pick up your books as well. And I think what you've put pen to paper with your books, I want to explore that. And we'll come to that in a little bit. You've been there, done that. So you need to build your own portfolio. If you 12 investment properties, for example, for you to help, I think it's $600 million worth of property help buy for clients. So again, we talk about the trained eye. You've seen probably to buy 600 million, you've probably looked at maybe 3 or 4 times that, if not more. So you've certainly got a really good understanding, exposure to the Australian property market. And you're regularly sought out from a media perspective. So in terms of, I guess, the knowledge that you've built up over time, that's what I want to try and kind of pull out of your head over the next maybe 20, 30 minutes and try and pass that on to our investor clients as well. But before we do kick off, I'd love if you could just share a little bit what I call the 3 Ps. So a bit about yourself personally, a bit about yourself professionally, and then a bit about your own property journey as well, Bushy.
Yeah, great, mate. Well, as is obvious from my nickname, which is basically my name, Bushy, I'm a boy from the bush who went to the big smoke and now back in the bush. Yeah. And as they say, Aaron, you can take the boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the boy.
Go full circle in life.
Yeah, very proudly a country boy. On the personal front, I'm also a bit of a closet muso, so don't let me loose on the piano or get me in a karaoke room because I don't even need to drink to embarrass myself there. I love to play field hockey, mate. I've been playing field hockey since I was 11, so if I get through this season, I'll have hit my 800th game.
That's unreal. And I feel like hockey, just to touch on that point, I feel like hockey is one of those games where you can have a really long career in hockey. I feel like people they start it, they've got a love for it, and they can continue to play 20, 30, 40 years onwards sometimes as well. It's a game that stands the test of time, right?
Mate, there are 8-year-olds still hockey in Melbourne, would you believe?
It's unreal.
So there's hope for me yet, mate.
Absolutely, mate. Got plenty of legs left in you, mate. That's for sure.
Yeah, fitness is you talked about sustainable success earlier, and my own belief is that it lies at the intersection of self, health and wealth, and self is what's between your ears. Health is what you do day to day and the rewarding rituals and happy habits that you build up, and that then feeds into ultimately achieving wealth and however you decide to define it. But mate, we also rescue Samoyeds. We love our Samoyed dogs. You wake up to these awesome smiles every morning. So that's a little bit about where my interests lie, apart from my passion for property. Born in a 2-horse town in country Victoria called Goroke. Was pretty challenged early on. I was born with a hair lip and had really chronic asthma as a youngster.
Yeah.
And because we moved around a fair bit, my father was a stock and station agent. So we moved from country town to country town. And because of the moves, I ended up being a lot younger and therefore a lot smaller than the rest of the class during those formative years. And I was unfortunately often referred to as the short-ass, flat-faced, punk-chested runt. So, my way
character building as a young kid.
Yeah, well, I copped a fair bit of rubbish because I was always the outsider, always smaller, and I had some physical challenges. So I sort of learned to overcome that, mate, by just working harder and trying to be smarter to keep up with the rest of the crew.
Yeah.
And I remember early on, because I spent so much time in bed gasping for breath, I used to draw and create and design things. That was what I used to pass the time with. And that was great. But my old man used to say, son, that's really good, but at some stage you've got to get out and get a real job. And I used to think, how am I going to combine my love of drawing and designing with something that's respected as a profession? And then the penny dropped. I had become an architect.
Unreal.
So that's where my initial passion for property started, Aaron, and it's pretty much developed ever since. So, I often say my professional life has been in two halves. There's BC and AD, and what I mean by that is before the crisis and after the divorce. It's pretty much how my professional life has actually unfolded.
Yeah.
Because I like a lot of Aussies, I was chasing the Aussie dream, which was to work hard, and fortune were bound to follow. And that meant I could buy a beautiful home and pay it off and put money into super and then tick off my bucket list when I retired. Yeah. So, in those early years, to the outside world, I looked like I was living the dream. I was working on some fantastic projects across Australia and Asia, and I was had a lot of fun. For example, spent a couple of years designing and reshaping the Uluru Ayers Rock Resort.
Wow.
So, on the outside, I was looking like I was living the dream, but the reality, mate, was on the inside, I was dying on the vine because, for 17 odd years, I was working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. And I was really got to be at a stage where I was pretty much like a dead man walking, and I felt totally stuck on the treadmill. I was in this never-ending cycle of work and struggle, and unfortunately, I ended up burnt out, broken and broke. And at 33, pretty much lost everything. I lost my marriage, I lost my wealth, and my self-wealth with it. So I really couldn't believe that I'd ended up there. And about the same time, it's funny how things happen in threes, but about the same time, my father, who'd always been my role model, started having some major health issues. Yeah. And, his attitude, like many Aussie guys, was, she'll be right, mate.
Exactly.
And he totally ignored his health, pursuing wealth. And as a result, he got cancer. He had multiple strokes, and he spent the last 10 years of his life dribbling out the side of his mouth, totally paralysed down one side in a wheelchair with mum as his carer. And I'd never forget him saying, mate, in those dying days, he looked me in the eye and he said, son, it's about time you stopped following my example. It's about time you stopped working for money and started getting your money to work for you. And that really shook me up, Aaron. It was a pivotal moment for me. It pretty much became my mantra. And then, as many Aussies have done, around about the same time, a mate of mine dragged me along to a Robert Kiyosaki conference in good old Adelaide.
Unreal.
The old Rich Dad, Poor Dad fame. And I'll never forget him saying from the stage, at the moment that passive income becomes a part of your life will change. And that absolutely, totally resonated with me. It was a real light bulb moment. I actually refer to it now as my Kiyosaki moment. And from that day on, Aaron, I saw the world completely differently, and I became what I now affectionately refer to as being passive aggressive. and what I sort of jokingly mean by that is I became very aggressive about passive income.
How good's that?
So everything from that point on had to do 3 key things. It had to create passive income, it had to grow in value, and it had to be a saleable asset. Beautiful. And our thinking really shifted from the old salary to savings, from income to investment, and from to wealth. And I developed what I now refer to as 2-eye seeing, and which is almost like a parallel perspective, because as an architect, you're used to creating in your mind's eye something beautiful that you want at the end of the journey, and then you progressively put a team around you and take the steps to make that happen. Yeah. So that became the essence of what we now refer to as living by design. And my now life partner in all things, Sonia, and I got together on a wintry Sunday afternoon in a little country restaurant in Clarendon in South Australia. And we actually designed our ideal lifestyle. We monetized it, and I recorded on the phone. I've got vision boards, which I've still got around the house, affirmations that went with it. And that became both the magnet and the compass that has enabled us to make decisions day to day on whether it's taking us closer to that or further away.
On track or off track, it's like how galvanized have you guys got by just writing it, by seeing it, by agreeing on it, for example? And I mean, when you talk about, I love your wife Sonia. I've had the pleasure of having Sonia, and something magical happens when you're building the house of the same blueprints, as opposed to how many couples are trying to build the same house of two different blueprints, and they're competing priorities, isn't it?
Totally, mate. That's a very good point, because that process that we started way back when in good old country Clarendon, we now do every year. So we take four days out every year, and we sit down and we really enjoy it. It's a real exciting process, and it reinvigorates us every year, because we check in what's changed, what's different, and enables, a bit like a GPS, it enables us to retack and make sure that we're on track. And that became the basis of because we knew where we wanted to get to, then the investing roadmap we then followed pretty much fell out of that. So at that stage, Aaron, I was on the bones of my backside, putting it bluntly. Yep. And we didn't have 2 cents to rub together. It was a real ground zero for both of us. So what I first did, actually, because I had very little funds at all, I actually day traded the share market for a couple of years to put enough money together to get our first deposit on a property. And then Sonia and I started on what I now, hindsight's an easy thing, Aaron, but I refer to it as the money medicine. Or the relationship relay that we then started, because both Sonia and I wanted to have a fulfilling career, but we also wanted time out to spend doing things that are important to us. So what we did is, and if you're familiar with the Olympics cyclists, where the Madison race, where you've got two cyclists competing, one's going hard around the track, the other one's sort of resting on the top of the track, and then they switch over, and they keep switching this until the end of the race. Well, Sonia and I did this on what I call the worker and the wealth builder approach. So, we survived for a period. Sonia worked while I day traded. Then we decided that our first business was going to be a property management business, because we were so dissatisfied with the level of property management we were getting from our own properties. Yep. So while Sonia started to build that business, I then did some consulting work for government to pay the bills. And then once the property management business was up and running, we both realised that property is very much a game of finance, and that it's not about rate, it's about reach. So we recognised that if we were really going to build the portfolio, that we really needed to understand the finance side of the equation. So I joined two partners early on in a finance business. And then ultimately we sold the property management business. Sonia and I came together, and KnowHow was born as a lifestyle business about 7 years ago now, mate. Unreal. So that's pretty much the journey as far as that goes. And I've got to be honest, we started investing very heavily way back when, and thank heavens we did, and thank heavens I followed Dad's and Robert Kiyosaki's advice, because about 8 years ago I got that call that I never want to get. Our family doctor, who'd been our doctor for nearly 30 years, rang me to tell me that Mum had terminal cancer and only had about 12 months to live. And understandably, Mum was absolutely devastated with that, mate. She was the most giving person we'd ever come across, and she was more worried about the fact she wouldn't be able to help us and others than she was about what it meant to her. Yeah, wow. And Mum was always about TLC. It was always about tender, loving care. Yeah. And I realised at that point, mate, that the best thing I could do to give back to Mum, given how much she'd given to me, was to take that 12 months and spend that time with her. And it was really the best and the worst year of my life. The reality is, Mum and I had all the hard conversations, mate. We laughed, we cried, we reminisced. I was there with her at all of her treatments, and her dying wish was to die at home in her own bed. So myself and my two brothers made sure we made that happen to her. And while it was the most difficult year, it was also surprisingly the best year in terms of fulfilment, because I finally realised what Mum had always known, and that is that true fulfilment comes from giving freely to others without ever expecting anything in return. And I guess the gift I had following my good father's advice is that the only reason I could take that 12 months off is that we had the freedom of time, because our investments were generating income that didn't rely on me to generate it. So, at the end of the day for me, Aaron, it's all about time. And, sort of rolling forward to now, Sonia and I enjoy an awesome lifestyle. We're really wanting to give back to others. We're really wanting to wake up and shake up hardworking Aussies to the fact that the traditional Aussie dream is broken. If you think you're going to just pay off your home, put money in super and then retire comfortably, you're kidding yourself. Yeah. And it's really important to get invested. So, we're really keen now to, together with you, very similar message, to open hardworking Aussies to the opportunity that lies before them and the traps if they don't start getting invested. So that's pretty much the journey as it stands, mate.
Mate, there's so much gold in there. I think that one of the big ones is, yes, you talk about hardworking Aussies, and we're telling people it's like, you're working hard, but is your money working hard for you, or are you just caught on this bit of that treadmill, for example? I mean, numbers won't come as a surprise to you, but we talk about inflation at 5%. I don't think wage growth is going to match that. So effectively, you're going to go backwards in life because your wages aren't going to meet your cost of living. And so there's that deficit already in a household. Get a pay rise, people probably spend it before they actually get a chance to earn it. And it's like, right, these are all the trappings of this lifestyle. You need streams of revenue, for example, to then, if you see your life as a business, to go, right, if you're barely just breaking even, you wouldn't tell that's a good business plan to anyone that's self-employed. But how many households are breaking even and going, that's simply just not good enough, guys? And they're tough conversations to have because it's highly emotionally charged, because it's money and family, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely right, mate. And we're so busy these days that we just don't step out of the exercise to take a little bit of time to really reflect on where we're heading. And that one of the first things we do with people that we try and help is we go, okay, well, let's just project forward on what you're currently doing and see where you're going to end up. And then ask them the question, are you happy with where you're going to sit? Because 90% of the people we talk to, Aaron, are likely to end up in a position where they're trying to retire on somewhere between 15 and 25 grand a year. Yeah, spot on. Now, spot on. It's a very scary concept, mate. But the interesting thing is, as you would well know, is that the reverse of that is it's not that difficult if you've got enough time on your hands to completely change that position. And from our perspective, property is the best vehicle in the country to allow you to make that happen. Yeah, spot on. So speaking of property, and you've mentioned, and you've been very open and generous to share your own portfolio. So thank you very much for being open. Every investor's journey is a bit like a roller coaster. There'll be some highs, there might be some lows, there'll be some challenges, for example, where things are just going great, and then it comes kind of crashing down. So when you reflect on your own journey, yourself and Sonia, wins, setbacks, losses, learnings, for example, all of the above, can you kind of summarize the portfolio in a nutshell, mate, if you could? Yeah, well, I could probably honestly say that I've probably made every mistake you can possibly make, Aaron. But the good thing about that for me is that I treat mistakes as the biggest learning opportunities. Spot on. And we've learned more from those issues than we have if it was plain sailing. Yeah, exactly right. So, I'd give you a couple of examples. My very first entree into the property investment arena was back when I was an architect, and I was, wet behind the ears. Yeah. Thought I was going to change the world, and bit off way more than I could chew. And we ended up doing a 1 into 4 apartment development in Alice Springs, would you believe? Right, okay. Because I was actually working as an architect in Alice Springs at the time, and I did everything wrong. So as an architect, it's all about winning awards and designing fantastic buildings. So we spent way too much on all of the wrong things in the wrong place. Then add the complication of the fact that it was me and 3 other partners in that. So, that's like marrying 4 people when you're trying to go into an investment exercise together. Really didn't spend much time getting clear on what our mutual vision was. Because we'd overcapitalised and the market changed significantly over the 12 months that we got into it, and what we thought we were going to get for the properties was nowhere near it. Then each partners had different needs and desires. So that was a very ugly baptism of fire for me in the exercise, and I really licked my wounds from there. So when we seriously started to invest, when Sonia and I got together, again, we probably made some of the biggest mistakes early on. And a lot of that was because I didn't trust anyone, Aaron, I wanted to reinvent the wheel. And in those situations, you just don't know what you don't know. So, we were the classics, mate. We tried to find a property in our own backyard that we would like to live in, which is the worst possible recipe for investment that you can get. And we ended up with a good property, and it's actually worked out well for us. We walked the streets, we found a property that we liked. We tracked down the owner, who happened to be in Vietnam at the time.
Wow.
And after a bit of toing and froing, managed to negotiate the purchase of the property. And we paid the princely sum of $84,000 for that 3-bedroom home in south of Adelaide back in the 90s. Properties, time is very forgiving in property. So that property is now worth about a bit over $700,000.
Fantastic.
And we've still got it in the portfolio. But some of the issues that we made early on, we had too many properties in close vicinity.
Okay.
So, and as this is the really important thing about investing in property. It's not about only investing in the properties, investing in your own knowledge, and that evolves and grows over time. So the more knowledge you have, the better you get, and the better people you surround yourself with. So we shifted from being properties in our backyard being borderless, and started to spread property around the country. And then overseas, we jumped on a plane and went to the US when the GFC hit, because we thought, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to pick up properties way cheaper than they're ever going to be, which they were. But that's been very challenging, I've got to say. Dealing with a different culture in a different country, in a different tax regime.
Correct.
And the major mistake we made there was that we assumed wrongly that the professionalism of property people in the US would be on par with Australia, and that's definitely not the case. Australia is leaps and bounds ahead in terms of professionalism. So while the properties have done okay, it's been a real headache trying to keep tabs on what's happening, manage them. We've turned the people over a number of times. That's been, I think, too challenging, to be honest. I've always said, if you create a second job when you invest, you're probably not doing the right thing. And, the late night phone calls and whatnot associated with those properties have actually been a bit in fun and games. On the positive
this is not
side,
the first time I've heard this about US property, by the way. I mean, I've had a few clients that have bought US properties and the yields were phenomenal. For example, they bought well cheaper than they could buy in Australia, and go, right, it's great, but it came down to the administration of it and going, right, the admin side of it became far too time or energy consuming as well. So there's no passive investing either. You've got to be quite active when you're hands-on and managing a portfolio across borders.
Absolutely right. But on the positive side, though, I think some of the learnings that we have picked up along the way, and it's a little bit contrary to a lot of players in the property space, and perhaps it's because I'm an architect. I'm very comfortable with building. Because I spent so many years doing it. But and I wouldn't be suggesting you do it in the current climate, because the construction industry is out of control, and we've actively moved clients away from the new build space, given the difficulties of managing cost and time delivery at the moment. But in a normal scenario, if you can locate a really good block in a tightly held area, and you can build purpose-built a property that comes with all of the tax benefits that go with it, and you're effectively building it below market value, then they can be extremely good vehicles. So they perform very well for us over time. But again, I wouldn't be suggesting as a first-time investor that you jump into that, because your knowledge and expertise just isn't there, and there are a lot of risks that you're not even aware of when you start down that road.
Spot on. As a first-time investor, you don't have that margin of error sometimes as well, because you're on maybe a limited budget. You need that first property to go well, so you get the confidence and the equity to then go again, for example. So when the first one's a little bit risky, it's like, look, this could come off as a great risk, great reward. But if it doesn't, it's going to set you so far backwards that you're better off doing nothing sometimes than trying to go into a subdevelopment or a knockdown rebuild as well, right?
Yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Beautiful. So I 100% agree with you there, Aaron. I guess one of the other things that was really beneficial to us was that we became accidental rent-vestors. Rent-vesting wasn't even a thing back in the 90s when we started this exercise, but we bought this property well south of Adelaide, and we were a good hour and a half from there to work. So we ended up renting a townhouse much closer to the city, and then converting the property into a rental property at that point in time, and then started to really understand all the benefits that come from being able to write off all the costs associated with anything we did with that property during the time that it was in that position. So we've become big fans of rent vesting, and I've helped a lot of other people who initially don't have the mindset, but once they see the numbers and what it can do for them, it can be a very powerful way to really start getting yourself ahead in the property arena. Spot
on. Yeah, rent vesting isn't for everyone, right? So there's sometimes, like families that want to put down roots, for example. It's like, well, hang on, your rent could be equivalent to your mortgage, and you don't have other assets to your name, for example. But if you understand the power of rent vesting, and it's a time in your life where it suits you, it can be a really, really great way to get in. That property can grow in value, and you don't have necessarily all the costs that come with maintaining, because maintaining and buying and maintaining a house can be quite intense as well. I can say that now that we're homeowners. I'm like, this needs to be done. This needs to be done. And it's like, it can become a little, I won't say a money pit, because it's your lovely, beautiful family home, but it takes a lot as well to maintain a house, where if someone else is paying for those costs, it's a bit of a win-win.
Totally, mate. Totally. So that's probably the main things that came out of that, Aaron. I think there's others that I can go into, but mindful of.
We can chat for hours. I dare say we're going to get you back in. But one thing, I don't know when we've had a chat in the past, something that really kind of resonated with me is when you see property, one as a team sport, but also as an elite sport, right? So you need turning up and being technically, we'll use your analogy of hockey, turning up and technically being good is one part, but if you're not doing the strength work, if you're not doing the diet work, if you're not doing the mindset work, if you don't have the right gear, for example, if you don't have the right team around you, being a great player is only one part of that, but there's no way to win.
Right. Totally. I often say to people now, when it comes to property, you're not a player. You're the owner of your team, and your only job is to manage your managers.
There you go.
Because if you are creating that second job, you're not going to do it half as well as someone who does it all the time. It's going to take your eye off the ball on other things, and the time that you would otherwise be spending either building your business or spending it with friends and family, tied up on doing a half-baked job on something that someone else can do far more effectively, just doesn't make any sense to me. So, it's that old analogy, if you had to have life-changing brain surgery, you wouldn't go to Bunnings, grab a scalpel and some metho and have a crack at it yourself in front of the mirror in the ensuite at home. You'd get the best possible neurosurgeon and all of the team around him to make sure that operation was successful. Yet unfortunately, that's exactly what a lot of investors do. They don't see the value. They look at cost rather than value, I guess, is the best analogy there, Aaron. And rather than see the advantages of engaging a independent professional to make that happen, they try and blunder through themselves, as I did when I first started, and as a result, are making mistakes they don't even know that they're making.
No, well said, mate. Well said. I did mention at the start that you published 2 books, and I mean your books have got great insights. I've been privileged to pick up and have a read through them, mate. So I'm no doubt a labour of love to put pen to paper and trying to get those thoughts. It also, it's something that you become proud of as well. But take me through a little bit about the ethos. So, I mean, your first book, The Freedom Formula, is fantastic, right? I love what it stands for, and I think that's almost a bit of a personal journey and reflection. If I look at your life and your journey, it's almost like this is my blueprint for my life, and people have resonated with that because they've been on the same, call it, treadmill of life. And then you look at your next book, Get Invested, for example, and again, building a part of your story and your journey as well. Do you want to take us a little bit about what's inspired, then a little bit about what's inside the book as well?
Yeah, well, I guess the reason I wrote the book was for what we've already talked about. I wanted to wake up hard-working Aussies to the fact that if they don't get invested, then the future looks pretty bleak. But I also couldn't find a book at the time, Aaron, that really took people through the whole process.
Yeah, okay.
There were bits of it, and there was a lot of generalizations. But there was nothing that went from getting clear on your vision right through to delivering that, and how property as a vehicle and the importance of the finance piece of that fitted together to allow people to then pretty much follow the bouncing ball. So I spent a lot of time and energy really trying to boil it down into a format that people would both enjoy but get a lot out of.
Yeah.
And take them through that process and look at the good, the bad, and the ugly as far as that's concerned. So it's while property's at the centre of it, because for me it's all about helping people to achieve whatever their ideal lifestyle is.
Yeah.
And it goes a fair bit further than that. And as I keep saying, Aaron, it's not about the property or the money. It's all about time at the end of the day. So property is the vehicle, money is the tool that ultimately gives you the time and the freedom to enjoy fulfilment in whatever that means to you. And there's a couple of key principles that I like to outline in the book. And, I talked earlier about my good mother who, I love her dearly, and she was all about TLC. Well, there's three key things for sustainable success, which are almost laws of nature. And if we boil it down and talk about them in TLC terms, it's time, leverage, and compounding. So time, what I've learned over the years is that the property journey, if you're going to do well of it, is at least a 15-year journey. And if you look back at property cycles over the last 30 years, most areas haven't gone through that cycle for it takes 15 years to do that. So this is about embracing property as a long-term play. It's also about leveraging other people's expertise and leveraging other people's money. And, one of the big benefits of property is the fact that banks are still prepared to borrow 90+% against the property, and banks don't lose money, Aaron.
Oh, great.
Then that's telling you that it's a pretty safe
house will always
place to be parking. Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, the C of the TLC is compounding. And, Albert Einstein referred to as compounding interest as the eighth wonder of the world. Those who understand and earn it, and those who don't pay for it. Those key things are pretty important to me. But also for me, it's not about the property. It's about the principles, the people, and the process that you need to adopt to make it happen. And the property is actually the last thing. The property pops out that process, not the starting point. So, I use this analogy, Aaron, of similar to preventative health. Most people are familiar with preventative health, and that's, it's about taking regular supplements and vitamins that are going to build and sustain your health so that you don't get sick. I use the term preventative wealth, which is about taking the vitamin supplements, which end up being the 8 core principles. So if we break vitamins, each of those letters down, then that actually summarizes what I consider to be the 8 core principles of being successful in property, and really does dictate what I'm talking about when I talk about the freedom formula. So if we break those vitamins down very quickly, because ultimately it's about getting fulfillment and freedom. You can only have fulfillment and freedom if you've got time on your hands. If you're going to get time on your hands, then you need to generate the passive income that's going to give you that time. So how do we do that? Well, let's break vitamins down. So the first 3 letters in vitamins, which are what I'd call the value, the interest rate of growth, and the time, are the things that most investors will get their head around. So the B for value is about adopting what we call the BFAX. So, how much can you borrow? What's your equity? How affordable is a property? What is the risk measures that you need to put around that? The I is for the interest rate of growth. And, this is something that a lot of people don't spend enough time on. A 3% difference in the growth rate over a 20-year period on a $400,000 property can be a difference of $800,000 in equity, or a 75% increase.
Wow.
So making sure you're focusing on areas that are going to maximise that growth is really important. Then we get to time. Now, as I've said, it's a long-term game, minimum of 15 years, and the magic compounding comes behind that. But then we get into, so they're the setup factors. The remaining 5 letters of vitamins are what I call the sustainability factors. And as you and I both know, Aaron, over 54% of first-time investors sell a property within the first 5 years.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty convinced that it's because they haven't put time and energy into understanding these 5 sustainability factors. So we break those down.
Just to stop you there, I don't want to jump in, but I almost feel like the market's been so generous to investors, and we're going to see a huge uptick of investors that jumped on during COVID. And as we come out of this cycle, I'd almost say that's going to be either shrunk down, or we're going to see more investors maybe sell for not as much of the profit as they thought they would as well, if they decide to sell. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting,
Aaron, because I often talk about the property S-curve. And, in most areas, and they're all operating out of sync with each other, but most of them will have growth of somewhere between 2 to 5 years, and then it'll plateau between 5 to 8 years before it goes through its next growth spurt.
Yeah.
Well, what's going to happen now, and we've seen this happen in the past, people will jump in right at the top of the market just as it's flattening out and plateauing. The property values are unlikely to increase much for the next 5 to 8 years. And many investors will get disgruntled with that, throw their arms up in the air, sell the properties just before they go through the next growth spurt.
Yeah.
So that timing exercise is really important. But if we sort of shift into the sustainability, the A in vitamins is for affordability. And I don't see enough investors look in detail at exactly how much is a property going to cost in year 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 before they've signed on the dotted line to make sure that they can actually last the distance. So, I spend a lot of time with people really getting down to the nuts and bolts of exactly how much the property costs so that they can hang on to it while it is increasing in value, and it's not going to be a big drag on their salary savings or limit their lifestyle.
Yeah.
So that affordability piece is a really important consideration. And then the M in the vitamins is for mindset. So this is about your beliefs, your attitudes, and your expectations. And I jokingly say that there are 6 P's in mindset, and they are purpose, perspective, plan, be proactive. It's about the probability and risk. It's about patience and persistence. So you need to be clear on your purpose, and this needs to be supported by a perspective exactly how you want to live your life. You then need to create a plan of how you're going to get from here to there. And you need to be proactive by implementing the action to make it happen that sits comfortably with your probability or your sleep at night factor.
Yeah.
And then you need to monitor the performance of your investment. And last and importantly, you have the patience and the persistence to stay the course and see it through. So that's what's between our ears, and it's often what's between our ears that makes or breaks our investment journey, not the property. The next thing is the eye for income, and I still hear a lot of people talking about become a full-time property investor. Give away your job and jump straight into it. But you and I both know that if you're not earning a consistent and sustainable income, then no bank's going to lend you the money to do anything.
Correct.
So
you've got a great lifestyle, but you just don't have the ability to grow your portfolio.
Exactly right. So having that ongoing consistent stream of income, particularly in the early days, is really important. The N in vitamins is for network. You probably heard that saying that your network equals your net worth.
Yes.
Well, that is about the elite team that you need to surround yourself. And the final one in vitamins is the strategy. And it's the most important one, mate. I don't see enough investors injecting time into not just the property strategy, but get your life strategy right first, then your finance strategy so you know what your capacity is and maximising your opportunity. And then finally, the property strategy folds out of that. So they're the key components, the key principles. It is about becoming passively aggressive, as I like to say. And I implore anyone who's listening and watching to your awesome podcast, Aaron, to get invested and to start doing it sooner rather than later.
Mate, sage advice from someone who's walked the path of an investor, had the roller coaster, and still is a huge advocate for it for no other reason but to go have a good life, and then you can then have the freedom to make decisions about how you want to spend your life and and building quality relationships with your family, right? And that's ultimately what it comes down to. It's building a better life for yourself and your family. Property is simply that vehicle to get there. And some people it may be shares, some people maybe crypto. There's no right or wrong. It's just whatever your poison is, double down on that and focus on it and get it to serve you rather than the other way around.
Totally. I mean, there's no rocket science in any of this, Aaron, and we haven't invented it, but there's very few people that do it.
That's right.
And, I find it quite sad, actually, that people kid themselves that, it's okay, I've got plenty of time. Well, time is a key ingredient because you've got to use your time you've got now so that you've got the time ahead of you to work for you, so you actually get your time back at the end. And for those who keep putting it off and other things get in the road, what becomes an easy walk becomes a very steep climb, Aaron. And the steeper that climb and the less time you've got, the more risk you've got to take to try and make that happen.
That's exactly it.
You and I have probably seen plenty of people in their mid-50s who come to me and say, they have what I call their oh shit super moment.
Yeah.
They go, oh shit, my super's not going to be enough to sustain my lifestyle. I'm either going to have to keep working until I drop or survive on the smell of an oily rag. And they come to me and say, Bushy, help me out. I need to invest in property. I want to retire in 5 years. And I say, well, you're kidding yourself. It ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
You're going to be having to put the nose down and invest aggressively for the next 15 years to put yourself in that position. And
that's the challenge, aggressively, but you've got more to lose at that stage. Whereas, someone younger doesn't have the borrowing capacity, but they've got the risk appetite or the aggressiveness on their side, but they don't have the ability. Whereas you go later in life, it's like, now you've got the means, you've got good income, you've got good equity, for example, you've got good borrowing capacity, but you're less risk adverse because if it goes, if you're at the market conditions, if anything goes wrong, it's like the stakes are a lot higher as well. So it's I see it. Totally. I see the challenge of the younger investors just want to go gun ho, and then later in life it's like, I worked too hard to risk this, for example, and you see that battle that goes on.
Totally agree. And I guess one of the things I'd also like to reinforce is don't be scared of mistakes. Because I see a lot of investors who'll make a mistake and that's it. They wash their hands, walk away, and they miss the opportunity. Use them as a real learning opportunity because that's where the biggest learnings will come from. And stick to it because, there's a lot of people over a long period of time that are well out of property and will continue to do so. People keep saying to me, well, is it too late now for property? Well, as long as people are living in houses, there's opportunity in property, Aaron.
Spot on.
And those opportunities will change and the way that you approach it will change over time. But those fundamentals, the TLC fundamentals, are always going to be there. It's all about the long term. It's all about leveraging, and it's all about the magic of compounding.
Well said, mate. Well said. Bushy, loved our chat, and there's so much wisdom there. If you want to connect with Bushy and his team at KnowHow, we'll include a link to their socials, to their website, and most importantly, the link to Bushy's books as well. So if you want to carve out some time on a weekend for self-development, putting yourself first and your knowledge first, which Bushy had that aha moment when he was seeing Rob Kiyosaki. I'm going to joke that you had Rich Dad, but you also had Richer Dad is your story as well. There might be a third book in you with that title right there. You can give me royalties later as well. But Bushy, I want to say thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your energy, but thanks very much just for being so willing to share your knowledge and your insights with us, mate. I really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Aaron. It's been very humbled to join you, and I'm actually looking forward to returning the third by getting you on the Get Invested podcast and the Realty Talk show, mate, so that you can spread your words of wisdom to a ready audience. Oh,
mate, wonderful, mate. Looking forward to it, and to all our listeners out there, I just want to say thank you very much for your time. We hope you found that helpful and useful as well. So if you do love it, drop us a comment or give us a review. We look forward to your feedback and making this a bigger and better podcast for your ears. And until next time, take care. That's another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. Thanks.